Hi, my name is Mike Kluger. Over the past 7 years, I've had the opportunity to trek up in the big mountains of the world between the altitudes of 15 to 20,000 feet. I've trekked 1,200 miles in the Himalayas, the Rockies, the Andes, the Alps. It's been a truly glorious experience. It's humbled me very much. I've come out from that experience understanding the words majesty and awe in a very real and concrete sense. While up in the mountains, I have taken pictures, and I'd like to share those with you, and those are included in my video. Hope you enjoy seeing them as much as I enjoyed being in the mountains.
So starting at midnight, you wake up, temperature 0 degrees. It's extremely cold, obviously. I put on 3 shirts, 2 jackets, 2 pairs of pants, 3 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of gloves, 2 hats, and a balaclava. Base camp at Kilimanjaro is at 15,000 feet. In this area, it's very physically difficult area to be in because it's all shale. You start up with nothing to guide your way other than a 12-inch beam off of your head torch. Immediately and after the base camp, you come up to a 1,500-foot mountain rise. It's almost as if Kilimanjaro is taunting you and saying, if you can't make it up this 1,500 foot, you're certainly not going to make it up another 5,000 feet to the top. You pass over the top of this mountain top, and then you come along to the trail of Kilimanjaro, which is iced over at this time of day, morning rather, and drop-offs are 500 to 5,000 feet as you move along. One of the things that the guides tell you is that as the temperature continues dropping to minus 25 at the top, you have to keep moving at all times. If you don't, you're literally going to freeze to death. The guides will turn you back if you do stop walking. The sky is in a kind of an inky black. The stars literally explode above you like fireworks. You have no sense of reference because the top of Kilimanjaro blends immediately into the black sky. So as you're walking along, circulation in your fingers and toes is really challenged. Every single step you take, you tend to take your foot and smash it into the ground, trying to get blood flow to your foot. You're constantly moving your fingers, trying to keep any sort of warmth that you can in them. You sooner or later, you begin to become mentally tired. You challenge yourself to try to come up with any sort of an effort to try to keep your mind off of the cold and how daunting the task in front of you is, because your mind is telling you to stop, your heart is telling you to keep going. It's physically very difficult. Soon you notice that your brain functions are starting to slow somewhat. It's hard to even do mental arithmetic in your head. You continue going on and on until you get to 18,000 feet, and it's at that point it's almost as if the cold wind off of the top of Kilimanjaro kind of splays down off the side and it runs through you like a freight train. This is the welcoming committee on the top, which is basically the cold off of the glaciers that is coming and encompassing you and enveloping you, so to speak. You continue on to 19,000 feet, and then Kilimanjaro flattens off to the first of 2 of its summit tops. As you make the turn, one of the things that happens is there's a large boulder that you pass. The guys literally tackle you as you pass this, because many people pass out when they make that turn. The change in the physiology of your body into a kind of easier state. Some people do pass out, and they would roll down into the volcanic cone on the top of Kilimanjaro. At this point, you've been trekking for over 6 hours. The light of the early dawn is just beginning to come about, and you come up to the top of the Kilimanjaro, and you watch one of the most beautiful sunrises in the world at 19,000 feet. Down below, you can begin to see some of the fields and some color, a little bit of the rivers down there. You continue on for another 45 minutes and you come up to the top summit of Kilimanjaro. Up there is a sign which thanks you and welcomes you to the rooftop of Africa, so to speak. You walk around the top of Kilimanjaro for 45 minutes, look at some of the glaciers, listen to the glacial ice melting and cracking, so to speak, and then you begin the descent down. And the descent down is another 6 hours of absolutely brutal forces on your legs. The slope is some 60-65 degrees. You could literally ski down to the bottom. You get to your tent and you have half an hour. You have a bowl of soup and you break the tent down and keep going. The Dreckenberg. To my right was an unusual outcropping of rock columns that were 30 feet high and 50 feet long. To my left and looming over me was a 200-foot high rise that was a half-mile long. Behind me, the hills raced off to the horizon. In front of me was a deep mountain valley whose opposite sides were 5 miles away. It was topped with a mountain ridge that contained a cornice of jagged, sawtooth rock formations. I walked along a sloping surface that resembled a wedge of cheese that had been laid on its side. It required a most unusual leg lift to walk across its continually changing slopes, clumps of small bushes, tufts of grass, scattered rocks, and random water holes. Fluttering around my feet while I walked was an entourage of grasshoppers that jumped in front of me like an advanced military guard announcing my arrival. This part of Africa can best be described as vast and expansive. Together, the hills and valleys leapt over each other again and again as far as my eyes could see. This land was filled with a special vitality, and a sense of life radiated from it. Up one rise and down another, I trekked up and over a few more rises, and then for several hours up a 60-degree slope. I went through field after field of 6-inch tall, greenish straw-colored grass that bowed forward into the direction of the wind. Finally, I crested the top and walked along a ridge line that culminated on a flat plateau. I walked over to an opening between 2 rock columns on its edge. The view that spread out in front of me was absolutely mesmerizing. What was unique about it, aside from its absolute vastness, was that its slopes were covered with a deep, dark, rich, bold, verdant green that contained occasional swatches of dark tones and hues. All of this was set against black rock and dark-colored sides, hidden behind shaded areas that were underneath passing clouds. In this view, the mountains and valleys joined together, playfully weaving and bobbing in and out amongst themselves. Everywhere I looked, the surface constantly changed. It sloped up and down, jutted in and out, dipped and rolled, flattened out, and then rose up quickly. Elsewhere, a 1,000-foot high rock massif rose up as it twisted and turned towards the sky. With every turn of my head, a veritable kaleidoscope appeared before my eyes. It was a joyous thing to see this magical interplay of colors, shades, shapes, and lines. I continued trekking for another hour, and to my absolute amazement, a most incredible sight appeared as I looked over the edge of yet another place on the mountain. In front of me stood a mile-long row of freestanding rock sculptures, each 1,000-foot high and 100-foot wide at its base. Each tapered up at a steep angle. They were a brownish-blackish color, and they had a rough, crumbled, marbled, and mottled surface that was poxed with holes. They were randomly covered with circles of white lichen. But what was most impressive was the perfectly balanced and intricate play of vertical and horizontal line work. I simply could not take my eyes off these rock sculptures. The horizontal lines contained Morse code-like dots and dashes. The vertical and horizontal lines intersected to create a surface of randomly shaped and sized cube. It was obvious that these rocks were quite old and probably had been there since the Earth's creation. I could only wonder what incredible events had occurred in front of these rock columns over the billions of years that they stood guard as sentinels over this land. Annapurna. At 13,500 feet, the trail changes dramatically, and there's a noticeable change in the complexion and slope of this trail. More specifically, the trail begins to rise up dramatically over the Marcianga River below. Looking down on the river, it's a bluish-green color that is continually laced with white water rapids. At this elevation, it is possible to look upriver for over a mile as the river twists and bends around landslides after landslides at the base of the respective mountains. From this vantage point, the river almost appears as a beautiful turquoise necklace. Further accentuating the river are sections of the mountain that have resisted the landslides and are covered with light brown grass and clumps of dark brown shrubs. Here the trail narrows to 18 inches and simultaneously the drop-offs increase to 1,500 feet with a slope of 60 degrees. The many landslides that appear create a perception that things will be getting more intense and more difficult very soon. At 14,500 foot, the high camp at Thorig Law indicates the massive work that will be coming. Here the trail assumes an almost maniacal slope. The ascent on the pass starts at night with near zero temperatures. The danger here is very real as the mountainside drops down to the valley below with a 60-degree slope. Should you falter here, there is no way to recover from a fall to the valley floor below. The first 90 feet of the trail are the absolute most dangerous, as it consists of snow and ice. Each step must be carefully made, secured, and checked before looking to take the next step in determining a proper foot placement. After coming off the snow and ice covered trail, you begin walking on a serpentine zigzag trail that hugs the mountainside. For 30 minutes I walked along a 15-inch wide trail with an unrelenting slope, and to my right was the ever-present 3,000-foot drop-off. The concentration during these 30 minutes is extremely intense. There is no past, there is no future. You only concentrate and live in the present. And then the trail narrows down to a 9-inch wide path with a 2-inch break-off on the downward side. To make the situation even more dangerous, there is a massive boulder jutting out from the upward side of the mountain that causes me to lean ever so slightly towards the downward side and the 3,000-foot drop-off. You examine this for a while. Finally, there is no choice. I place my foot down and hope for a steady perch to launch me around this boulder. Fortunate for me, it held my weight. After this, the trail turns away from the drop-off for the last and final time. After several hours of hiking in the dark, I had the sense that darkness would be receding. First, there is this awareness that you are ringed in a mountain valley. Then the sun appears, and behind it the mountain makes its presence known. Slowly, slowly, white streaks radiate up around the mountain, and then the sun makes its grand entrance and showers the mountain in a white, fiery yellow ball. The sky lights up, and finally, after 4 hours, the pass is within sight. In what seems like my last bit of energy, I passed over the 17,750-foot pass. Atop the pass is a plaque stating Thorig Law 5,416 meters. Congratulations for your success. The sign is draped with several hundred red, white, blue, and yellow prayer flags. It is a truly stunning view. The colorful flags set against the brown mountain and the steep, rich, bold blue sky. And then your focus shifts completely to the 5,000-foot descent. Descent from the pass can only be described as seemingly never-ending downward journey that continues on for 6 hours. First, the trail slopes down at a 30-degree angle with drop-offs of 500 feet. This continues for an hour, after which the slope of the trail increases to an incredible 60 degrees. The surface on which I walked
was loose dirt, so the coefficient of traction was very low. During the third hour of the descent, the trail is a mixture of tight hairpin turns and gentle serpentine transitions. In many cases, the hairpin turns are so tight that one step is in the forward direction and the other is in the opposite. During the fourth hour, the trail began descending straight down at an incredible 60-degree slope. Now the surface of the trail was loose gravel. For most people, this descent is an excruciatingly painful experience, as their knees are constantly being pounded with abrupt halts that must be made as you enter into an unstable forward-falling position. At the bottom of the 6-hour descent is the Kalangaki River Gorge. Here the mountains are completely void of any vegetation. It's here the riverbed that the mighty Kalangaki River flexes its muscles. In the summertime, the monsoon runoff swells across the full width of the riverbed. But in the fall and early winter, all that remains is the violence and havoc that the river causes on the land in the 2-mile-wide riverbed. For the most part, it is free of water for over 90% of its surface. All that remains is smooth, polished, rounded rocks. It is on this surface that the trail continues for 6 hours. On this 6 hours, you walk on 10-inch rocks, 6-inch rocks, and 2-inch rocks. The flight into Everest is certainly an eye-raising experience. The airport is the highest in the world, and Lukla is an activity area where a lot of the teams actually set up. You initially pass from the airport through a bazaar of 25 or 30 little shops. Yak trains are being assembled, but soon you pass into the basin of Everest, and what you notice immediately is that this is probably the most beautiful, greenest place on the earth. And the reason for that is because of the massive amounts of water that come off of Everest due to the monsoons, the rains, the glacial melt, and the snow. And you walk through a very broad valley with steep sides along the river. Day 1 is fairly easy. Day 2, you pass on the backside of a mountain, and it's all through forest, pine forest. It's fairly steep. The next day is somewhat of an easy day, but then on day 4, it's an absolutely thigh-busting experience as you head up to approximately 10,000, 11,000 feet. The trail never gives up, and you wind up at the Namche Bazaar, and then enter into the beginning of some real work as you see the Amadablin off to your right, and then come to the Tanbachi Monastery, where you see the lotus massive face for the very first time. Again, this is an extremely difficult trail that you come up, and then you come up to the bazaar, the Namche Bazaar, and it's all of a sudden all the beauty of Everest falls away totally and completely at 13,500 feet. Here Everest becomes the ugliest place on the planet. It is all gray and kind of brown, dusty brown, and it's devoid of any shrubs and vegetation. You continue on, passing up to the Gorik Steppe, and finally to Everest Base Camp. Here, the beauty of Everest is seen for the very, very first time, the massive mountains. Everywhere I looked on day 10 of my trek up in the Andes, Peru, I came to the Caracara Pass. And in front of me was a wall of mountains with rock slides and moraines that completely covered their slope. Everywhere I looked, there was an intimidating slope that seemed to defy scaling it. It took tremendous mental energy simply to turn my head, tilt my head, and survey the area around me and try to gain confidence necessary to just start up. I couldn't find any trail. It was an unimaginable moraine, but finally I began the ascent up the 1,500-foot slope. The mountain continuously threw everything it had at me. The trail was covered with loose rock, and it was with great difficulty that I was able to propel myself forward. All along the trail, there was a stream of water that continually crossed my path and made it even slipperier. Higher up, the rocks disappeared and pebbles covered the moraine. To make matters even worse, the mountain increased its slope to 40, 50, and then 60 degrees. Finally, it was the 65-degree slope. If the first 2/3 of the way up were absolutely thigh-busting, the final third was absolutely done exclusively on my calves. So steep was the angle that I was stretched over my poles like a skier. And as if that were not enough, the final 200 feet, as I came to the pass, was an extremely strong wind of 40 miles an hour, blowing very, very cold winds. But then, the last 15 foot to the top of the 16,000-foot pass, I looked up and lo and behold, I saw Alpamayo, the most amazing, beautiful, snow-covered mountain in the world. It's pyramidal shape, and on its left is the Santa Cruz Mountain. Both are covered with snow, and immediately beneath them is a blanket of rippling snow. On the left is a 2,000-foot light brown moraine of sloping sand. The mountain is black in color and covered with diagonal cracks. To the right is a smaller moraine, and behind it is a chalky-colored rock face with vertical lines. Immediately under Alpamayo is a bright green mountain lake. On its left is a huge bowl, shaped steeply with sloping walls of dirt that contain a high, dark blue mountain lake. On the opposite side, and immediately, there is a descent with sheer, straight down 80-degree slopes covered with loose soil. If I'd had skis, it would have been possible to have actually skied down the mountain. The concentration here is very intense. Every step is made slowly and meticulously, checked and then double-checked to prevent the consequences of falling and plunging down 3,000 feet. If the ascent had been intimidating to look up at, the descent was horrifying to look down at. The descent was devoid of any vegetation, and all I could see was that everything below me was loose dirt and gray rocks. It can be described simply as a truly angry and hostile place, a place whose stark beauty left a feeling inside me of utter helplessness. I descended up the first of two Alpamayo's lakes. In front of me, rocks created an immense, beautiful chevron pattern. Around the rocks appeared to have been grooves that had been clawed by an angry animal. In contact with these rocks, the water on the lake reflected the chevron pattern back again. Further to the left, a moraine of dirt wound down the mountain with a twisting and turning that transitioned into a trumpet's horn shape.
John Gardner. I came across a raging river, pounding against rocks, passed into an old growth forest filled with trees 30 inches in diameter and 45 inches in height. I continued walking, and I noticed the slope of the trail increased dramatically. Soon the trees disappeared, and it was as if a curtain opened up on the stage and revealed an amazing scene. In front of me was the base of the John Gardner Mountain. It rose up to the sky. Starting from its base were several bands of snow and rock, which gave way to a truly magnificent snow cathedral. which transitioned into a massive upward sloping snow apron, but this was no ordinary apron. It started upward at 60 degrees, but then abruptly became a 70-degree slope. The only way up was on snowshoes. Each step required intense concentration as I planted one snowshoe and waited for its sarrogated alligator-like teeth bottoms to take hold and keep me from rolling back, head over heel, down the mountain. Then I lifted the other foot and waited for it to take hold. Over and over, step by step, I literally inched my way up the mountain. At some point, I looked up and I was overwhelmed, realizing that my perch on life was only as good as the grip of my snowshoes. But then the slope of the mountain became dramatically steeper. It was as if the mountain was taunting me. Slowly, very slowly, I made my way up the 70-degree slope. Finally, this part of the mountain was behind me. The slope eased down to a manageable 30-degree slope. Then to my right, an incredible glacier appeared, seemingly nestled itself between two giant mountains. Early on the trail to Chimborazo, the colors literally explode all around me. Yellows, reds, and green of lichen, moss, and grass. It is a wonderfully joyous, happy place to be as the colors combine into a mosaic that flows over the land like a beautiful tapestry. Further along, the flowers begin to disappear, and shrub-covered fields gently rise and fall as they make their way up to the mountains that sit on the horizon. The trail hugs the side of the mountain, and as I rise, I come around a corner, and in front and center, Chimborazo appears. I stood there spellbound. Never in my life had I ever seen a mountain as amazingly beautiful as Chimborazo. Its color is purple, and it's set against blue, deep sky. Atop Chimborazo, pearl white snow and glaciers cover its top. To the east is a very high saddle, and to the west is a long, downward sloping ridgeline. It draws your eyes to Chimborazo and its upper two summits, above which clouds float gently through the sky. Around Chimborazo is an apron of dark brown lowlands, devoid of any trees. These further accentuate the mountain's purple color. I passed around the mountain on this ridge line. Initially, I went through grasslands that contained a small llama-like animal that's reddish in color called a vacuna. Higher up, the land was a desert-swept landscape. And finally, I rose into an area that was nothing more than barren rocks strewn across the landscape. Then I approached Chimborazo from the backside. Here the view is completely different. There is a massive flat plain that gives way to a perfectly formed volcanic cone. Extremely deep and perfectly round, colored in gray. In and amongst this cone, there are dark lines that radiate outward from its base. The upper half of Chimborazo is a pink color, strewn with streaks of red.
Above the tree line on Mount Fuji, the trail slopes up at a 45-degree angle and is 6 foot wide. On the left side of the trail, the rock formations are almost vertical. Their surfaces consist of a motley, dull gray rock filled with large voids and pockets that are the remnants of Mount Fuji's early days. Above 10,500 feet, the mountain is covered in a deep orange and brown colored mixture of dirt and volcanic ash. Rocks are strewn all about the Mount Fuji are barren of any vegetation, and the landscape appears more lunar than earthly. At this altitude, the trail steepens to 60 degrees and the path zigzags as it makes its way upward around the rock. On the final push to the top, the trail becomes dramatically steeper and more difficult. At the top of the trail is the Kazushi Jinga Shrine on the northeast edge of the crater.